How to be an effective Dungeon Master. As Dungeon Master, the beginner is faced with a difficult problem. The DM is the most important person in the D&D game. He or she sets up and controls all situations, makes decisions, and acts as a link between the players and the world he or she has created. Perhaps the most common question asked by beginning Dungeon Masters is, what do I do to run a game? It is possible to read through the rules and become slightly lost by all the things that must be prepared or known before DMing a game. Unlike most board games, D&D play relies on information from both the players and the DM. In board games, the way the game is played is obvious. First, one player moves, and then another. Actions are limited and choices are few. In this game, the action is only limited by the abilities of the characters, the imaginations of the players, and the decisions of the DM. The play will often go in unexpected directions, and the DM will sometimes be required to decide on situations not covered in the rules. The DM is the judge. As a judge, moderator, or referee, the DM must constantly deal with the players. Just as a referee of sporting events, the DM must be fair. He or she cannot be out to get the players, nor should he or she be on their side all the time. The DM must be neutral. If a party has played well and succeeded, the DM should not punish them by sending more and more monsters at them to thwart their plans. On the other hand, if the players have acted foolishly, they should get their just rewards. In combat, the DM should play the monsters to the best of the monster's ability. If the creature is stupid, it may be easily tricked and may not always do the smartest thing. If the monster is clever or intelligent, it will fight to its best advantage. The DM must be fair, but the players must play wisely. The DM is also the designer of the situations and must bear in mind the abilities of his or her players. It is the job of the DM to see that the situations and characters balance. If things are too difficult, the players will become discouraged. Too easy, and they will become bored. It is possible for a good player to win, yet still be challenged and at risk in doing so. Is the amount of treasure gained equal to the danger of trying to get it? As a DM, much satisfaction comes from watching players overcome a difficult situation, but they should do it on their own. To defeat monsters and overcome problems, the DM must be a dispenser of information. Again, he or she must be fair, telling the party what it can see, but not what it cannot. Questions will be asked by the players, either of the DM or of the character the party has encountered, and the DM must decide what to say. Information should never be given away that characters have not found out. Secret doors may be missed, treasure or magic items overlooked, or the wrong answer asked of a townsperson. The players must be allowed to make their own choices. Therefore, it is important that the DM give accurate information, but the choice of action is the player's decision. Throughout all this, making decisions, playing roles, handling monsters, the DM must remember that he or she is in control. The DM is the judge, and it is his or her game. The DM should listen to players and weigh their arguments fairly when disagreements arise. But the final decision belongs to the DM. The Dungeon Master's word is law. So that was from one of the original Dungeons and Dragons modules, B2, The Keep on the Borderlands, from Dungeons and Dragons Basic. This one was printed in 1981 and went with the Mulvey edition of the basic Dungeons and Dragons game. Now, I've watched a lot of Dungeon Master advice videos on the internet, and a lot of them cover basically the ideas outlined in those couple of paragraphs. So it's interesting that a lot of the basic D&D advice has been around with us for a long time about how to be a dungeon master. But of course, we're always learning as we go, even after all these years, 46 years of Dungeons and Dragons. I know because I was born the year Dungeons and Dragons was first printed in 1974. So that's a lot of time for a game to go on with basically the same concepts, even though the rules have changed and quite a bit over the years. It's still there's still all the basic concepts are still viable and valid. So Just thought I'd put that out there as kind of an introduction to the game and also an introduction to this channel, the Analog Adventure Society. My name is Nate. I have been playing tabletop games since about 1984. I was 10 or 11 when I started, so, 35 plus years ago. That's not to say I'm some kind of expert. I'm probably one of those eternal noobs in a lot of ways. I started out DMing, in particular in Dungeons & Dragons, kind of making it up as I went along. The rules were not super accessible for a 11-year-old back in the early 80s, so I tended to just have my players roll a die 20, and if they got high, they succeeded. But we had a lot of fun, and I got better as we went along. By the time I graduated high school, I could run a pretty good second edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons game, but even then I struggled. I'm certainly better now at gaining a mastery of the rules, no matter which edition I'm playing, and I do play several different editions. Right now, my group is currently playing Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition, using these reprints that Wizards of the Coast put out several years ago. These are actually available print on demand from DriveThruRPG, which is an awesome source for everything D&D. You can literally play every version of Dungeons & Dragons that has ever come out, even 4th edition, through either DriveThruRPG or the DM's Guild. Another version that we've been playing a little bit, and I'm trying to get more into, is Basic Dungeons & Dragons. This is basically the first Dungeons & Dragons. Now, this is the Rules Cyclopedia, which was printed in 1991, which is the most complete printing of the Basic Dungeons & Dragons rules. This book is incredible. It has got a ton of stuff in it. You can run a fully fleshed out Dungeons & Dragons campaign with just this book, and it's actually a pretty good way to start the game if you're a new Dungeon Master, because it's not very complicated in terms of player options. And that's also like a major critique of this edition, because the player classes are fighter, magic user, thief, cleric, elf, dwarf, and halfling. And that's it. I think some of the Mystara Gazetteers have rules for playing like humanoids, like orcs and goblins and bugbears and stuff like that. And there's like a book on shadow elves, which gives you another elf option. And there's a few other things in those Gazetteers that aren't actually in this book. But that's pretty much it as far as player character selection. There is a mystic class, which is basically a monk. It's a monk. They call them monk now. They used to call thieves, and now they call them rogues. But monk and mystic are pretty much exactly the same thing. There was also a class called the druid in here, which you couldn't start until you were 9th level cleric. So you could only be a human, and you had to be a 9th level cleric in order to be a druid. But this book has got a large monster selection. It's got rules about how to alter the monsters pretty easily. You can make them spellcasters. It talks about how to make basically gigantic versions of any monster or smaller versions of any monster, with some really simple changes to the rules. There are 2 warfare systems in here. There's a whole system for building a keep or an establishment as a player character, which was a kind of a big part of the old school game. I don't know. There's a basic gazetteer in the back of the known world from the original game. It's commonly called Mystara. It's a pretty cool world. There's quite a few cultures in Mystara, especially human cultures. They kind of are like graphs of real world, ancient and medieval cultures onto a fantasy setting, but they also work pretty well. and providing a lot of variety for the setting. Of course, there's also elf and dwarf and demi-human races and like cultures for those, and I think more than one in that setting. So if you're starting DM, don't discount the basic edition of the rules. A lot of people say that these older versions of the rules are harder. They bring up things like THAC0. I'll tell you the real quick trick on THAC0. In order to figure out what you need to hit something with THAC0, is you take the target's armor class and subtract it from 20, or from your THAC0. Let's say your THAC0 is 20, and that is the number you need to roll on your die 20. So if the target's armor class is 5 and your THAC0 is 20, you need to roll a 15. That's it. That's the mystery of THAC0. That's as hard as the math for it gets. You can also roll your die and determine what armor class you hit from it. So let's say your THAC0 is 20 and you roll a 14. You hit armor class 6. Not very hard math. Not complicated at all. Armor class is better when it's lower under that version of the game, but it's not hard when you're playing the old editions to convert your armor class to ascending armor class like the D20 versions. It doesn't take a lot of work, but there are definitely lots of different things. Most of the rules have slightly different mechanics. So, like in the Die 20 versions, the 3rd edition through 5th edition, you pretty much roll a Die 20 and kind of a similar Die 20 mechanic. Usually rolling higher is better. You're rolling for like your target number, your 2-hit your 2-hit number for attacking is kind of like how you resolve everything in a lot of ways. But in the older versions, like thief abilities had a different mechanic. They were percentile based. Saving throws had a different mechanic. Every class leveled up with a different amount of experience points. But it's really not that complicated to figure out the differences. And once you kind of get used to some of the differences in the older versions of the game, they start to make a lot of sense. And some things are actually easier to resolve once you understand those mechanics than they are in 5th edition, which is the current version of the game. So, like I said, my group has been playing a lot of 2nd edition lately, a little bit of basic, and I won't say 1st edition. 1st edition to me is 1st edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. 2nd edition is 2nd edition and Advanced Dungeons & Dragons. And then the Die 20 rules start at 3.0 and go up through 5. But that's actually, in a lot of ways, the at least 6th edition of the game, depending on who you ask. There's more. So I have played a fair amount of 5th edition. Its greatest strength is its simple mechanic and its universal mechanic. Its biggest weakness is the near infinite character variation you can have, especially when it comes to running the game, especially when it comes to new dungeon masters. Just the sheer variety of stuff that can get thrown at you between the different character classes and their subclasses, and it's kind of snowballed out of control. And I don't really enjoy running this version. I have used it to play a historic game that I ran for my son for a while, based on the English Civil War, the 17th century English Civil War, so the parliamentarians versus the royalists. And that worked pretty well because he didn't want to play with any kind of magic or mystical properties or any fantasy stuff whatsoever. He wanted to play a pretty hard historic game, and I was able to take a couple of the fighter classes and a couple of the thief classes that didn't really have a lot to do with any magic, and kind of work them out as, the basis for the player characters in the game, which was nice because that meant I only had to like memorize the rules for a few different classes instead of like, I don't know. I can't even tell you how many different class variations are in 5th edition right now. I have no idea because I haven't bought a book for a bit. I can't remember what the last one I bought was. Probably Ghost of Saltmarsh was the last 5th edition product I purchased. Not that I don't think it's a good game, it's just not really my type of game. Although I'll play it. I'm playing in a 5th edition Forgotten Realms game right now. And it's fine. So I kind of skipped over my hello and welcome to the Analog Adventure Society channel. I'm Nate. And I'm planning on with this channel not just talking about Dungeons and Dragons, although that's what I've started with. I'm planning on talking about quite a bit of tabletop gaming subject matter. I play a lot of role-playing games, not just Dungeons and Dragons. I play Call of Cthulhu. I play Shadowrun. I play Warhammer Fantasy role-playing. I play Savage Worlds. Those are some of the big ones. I've played a lot of other games in my time. I've run quite a few different games, quite a few games which are well known and quite a few that are not so well known. There's a ton of variety right now, more than there ever has been in the entire time I've been playing, partially because of just the power of the internet and the usefulness of things like self-publishing. It's really opened the door for anybody to do anything. So if there's something you want to do and it's not out there, just do it, or try to encourage other people to help you out with it, because you can do almost anything with role-playing games, and you can do just about anything you want to do right now, pretty much across the board. So, like I said, if there's something you want to do and it's not out there, you might want to look a little harder because there's a lot out there. And if not, try to get it done yourself. So I'll probably, because of my current equipment situation, which is not too great, I'm running with my laptop webcam, which is why it doesn't look so great, and a cheap mic I got from Walmart, which is not fantastic, but is better than my onboard mic on my little laptop. So I'm hoping to eventually expand the channel into like maybe a little bit on miniature painting, because I've been doing that for a long time. Maybe a little bit on terrain making, because I'm fairly okay at that. I've got a blog that I've had for a long time where I've put up quite a bit of this information. I have a much better still image capture setup than I do video capture setup, so I'll probably be getting into that when I get a better rig going. But I wanted to get started because that's what they say when you're getting into YouTube, is just get started. And that's pretty much the same advice to give you for running role-playing games, in particular Dungeons & Dragons. Just get started. Learn how to do the basic combat mechanics. Learn how to do the basic magic mechanics. If the game has got magic, Dungeons & Dragons does, obviously. Try to figure out the basic movement mechanics in combat, and then just do it. Just get it going. It's not really that hard. You can get pretty complicated with any version of the rules if you want to, but getting going is not really that complicated. So, my best advice for starting DMs or for starting players is to just jump right in and get it done. So, because you can just build from there. Try to find yourself a good group of people. It doesn't have to be big. In fact, it probably shouldn't be big. 2 to 4 players for a starting group or starting DM is more than enough. I would say avoid super complicated story-driven adventures. Go for things like dungeon crawls. You find a treasure map to a hidden tomb outside of town, and you go there and, oh, look, there's some undead skeletons, and maybe a trapped door, and maybe a puzzle you've got to solve to open up the sarcophagus that has, like, the best treasure. That's it. Do something like that. Have a few rooms. Learn a little bit about how to play the game, and just get going. So, welcome to the channel. Like I said, if you enjoy the video, please don't smash anything. Reach out and with confidence, gently caress the like, subscribe, and notification bell. Thank you, and have a good day.